So what I'm saying is, when the colonists came here, they already found us with the tools to be able to articulate the scientific world. I went there into school saying to them, okay, I want to teach kids about Sintu, and I want to teach them about the God equation, all right? So that they can unify God and science for supremacy in STEM. And then the principal said to me, well, this is a public school. We don't allow people to talk about spirituality. We don't allow people to talk about culture. We don't allow people to talk about God. I thought to myself, wow. She said, this is from the this is a direct instruction from the Department of Basic Education. It is 2026. We should stop thinking about catching up to Europe. Catching up, no. We should dream to leapfrog the world because we can. Not because of we affirm it and we confess it and we shout it, but because of we have a structure that can allow us to leapfrog the world.
In a world where Africans have lost their roots, it has become of vital importance to document our ways. In an effort to reverse the brainwashing of the past, where we were made to believe our ways are demonic, we are pressed to create dignified and respectful platforms to unpack our spiritual ways. The views and opinions expressed in this episode are those of the guest and do not necessarily reflect the beliefs or position of this channel, its hosts, or affiliates. This podcast is a platform for open discussions and exploration of various perspectives, including controversial and unconventional ideas. We encourage viewers to think critically, do their own research, and form their own opinions. The content is for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be taken as fact, advice, or an endorsement of any specific viewpoint. Viewers' discretion is advised.
Umoya Ulight, Umoya Ubright. As usual, we've got you that beautiful, beautiful education. Prince Sizwe was always so popular with you guys. So we are still unpacking Isintu. Baba.
We are not going to waste time, but yeah, I think the previous time we said we were going to carry on scripture and philosophy. So I'm a MOYA Z, They'll forgive me. We want to put that for another sitting. But now what we are going to do is we want to talk about various, I call it a mixed salad, but it's relevant because it's 2026 and then there's metric results and there's just a lot of things. I'm hoping that it's going to lay, again, a very strong foundation for what we are going to speak about in our next session. So there's been a celebration that metric results 88%. And the Minister of Basic Education and everybody, GNU, they're celebrating that. Well, I'm not happy, and there are also other people who are not happy, such as Professor Jonathan Jensen from Stellenbosch. Now, he makes a point that this is like celebration of mediocrity, which I do agree. It's an 88% of pass rate. However, the pass rate, when you look at it, it does not have the quality that we want. If you look at the STEM intake, which when we talk about STEM, we're talking about science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and they actually call it STEMs, okay? Because STEMs is like spirituality at the end of the day. So if you look at the history of science, of engineering, you will know that spirituality has been at the core of science innovation. But it's such an unfortunate thing that spirituality is taken out. But through what we are doing with MOYA SIZWE, and also the institutions that I founded, APES, Abakibe Africa Institute of Spiritual Science, we are helping to turn around the narrative or the order of the day, so that we might have spirituality as part of our curriculum or of our worldview when we talk about academia. Because it is very important that we think about spirituality, we think about how are we going to be able to not just to, because here's the thing, right? As you're going to be listening to me, we don't want to catch up to the Western world. See, we want to leapfrog. Sure, that's what you want, right? You want to leapfrog. So then, how do we leapfrog? We can only leapfrog by understanding that we are spiritual beings, and therefore we need to start life, even our education, from that angle of spirituality. So the pass rate, it's nothing to celebrate, really. It's nice. We're happy that students, they've worked hard, teachers, they've worked hard, because it's not the problem of students. It's not the problem of teachers. It's the problem of the system. It's a problem of structure, of education, which does not produce the best results that we want to be produced, especially when it comes to STEM. We've dropped about 3% and 5%, and a little increase of about 1% when it comes to physical science. But still, as Professor Jensen says, that the high failure rate that you have when you go to institutions of higher learning, such as universities, is indicative of how poor our education system is, you know. So, as Umamiya will say, Tina la gumoya sitola, that kind of education that we don't get, we call zabo mlungus schools. So you are privileged at that. And then there is this thing, a big problem which has been identified within this pass rate or this just phenomenon, is that there is a high dropout of young males, which is boys. And you don't find them go metric, and also when it comes to STEM, you don't find young males there. And since I am a young man myself, and I'm also a high school dropout, all right, grade 10, so I think I can have a clear insight into why young people, who are mostly boys, find themselves dropping out of schools. And these are the things which we don't talk about. Now, when you're talking about a young man, you're talking about a male. You are talking about a defender. This is natural instinct and also nurture. This is how we grow and groom our young men. They are providers, they are protectors. Okay? So when it comes then to the country, you know that the people who go out to war to stop the enemy coming in is boys, mostly. And of course, we have the history in Africa that is unique, that will also find women. But mostly it's boys. And then you will understand that if then you have a situation whereby you have colonizers who have come into the country, and now we have to now study the very concepts, languages, education of the colonizer. You don't know what that does to the mind of a young man. I mean, I've never heard it spoken anywhere. For me, I draw from the kind of conversation I used to have in high school. We talked about the Babylon system. We talk about, it's a spirit of rebellion. And it's no surprise then that at the end of the day, we find ourselves not finishing school. Secondly, a concept of a house divided cannot stand. And this is not limited then to young men. This is just about every one of us globally. But I do say that Africa is a ground, it's a ground zero of that, the phenomenon that a house divided cannot stand. What am I meaning? I mean that our world, especially in Africa, in fact anywhere, is divided into two. There is spirituality, there is physicality. What I mean is this. There is a spiritual way in which you can, if I want a job, I go to in the spiritual space, be it in Dumbeni, be it in Sotweni, be it mosque, wherever. There are instructions which I have from the spiritual space and the kind of doctrines that I will have, but they are not in line with the physical, scientific, mathematical doctrines of how to get by in the world. That means the worldview, the spiritual worldview, and the physical worldview, as we stand, it is different. It's like the world is schizophrenic. Reminds me of Albert Einstein when he said that, I refuse to believe that the world is schizophrenic. He was talking this in line with the theory of general relativity and the quantum mechanics. So the theory of general relativity posits that, okay, let's not get into it. We'll get into it when we get into SWT theory. I think it will be the maybe 5th sitting or so. But Einstein found a problem. This was his 2 theories. Well, one he did found like literally, and then the other one he was responsible to begin together with Max Planck. But his idea was this: we can't have 2 theories which explain the world in different settings or in different explanations. So you have 2 theories which explain the same world. This is, the world cannot be schizophrenic. There must be one theory that will explain all things. And that's what gave rise to the TOE, the theory of everything. And we're going to talk about the theory of everything. And that's what I'm talking about, and talk about these other proofs of God. So spirituality and physicality cannot, our world cannot be defined and explained from 2 sources which are not similar. They call this duality. Now, I will show you that in Africa, I don't know if it will be today, but in Africa and in Sintu mostly, because Africa is so vast. So when you say Africa, you need to be able to explain what Africa you are talking about, at what time, that's what I mean, at what kingdom, you know, all that. But so when I'm talking about Africa most of the time, I am talking about a Sintu-based civilization. And this is the civilization that precedes the African civilization and also the global civilizations. It's Africa at its peak. That's what I'm talking about. And then you have Africa at its fall. You know, you have, so we say the things of our ancestors. You have to be very much aware which are you talking about based on what I have just said. So our then spirituality and how we explain physicality, it's not unified. These ideas are in conflict. And that's why when you go to the church, you will be told, I mean, I was at the church the other time, I used to visit the church, but then after this preaching, my spirit just got very sad, so much that I couldn't go back anymore. Because the preacher said that there is such a thing as the God kind of logic. He says the God kind of logic will be the miraculous Moses kind of logic. You know, the opening of the Red Sea. That's not something that you think happened logically. And then he says, then there is also a 1, 2, 3 kind of logic. They call that a book logic. So I thought that's bad. And be it at church, be it in Dumbeni, it's the same to me, in the sense that the explanation of the world is from 2 different angles which do not unify. This is a big problem. It's a problem in Europe. It's a problem in America. It's a problem in China. Believe you me, here in Africa, I say it's a ground zero. It's even much of a bigger problem. And with the rise of what rightfully should be African spirituality, Africanism, we are still finding our ground in this thing. And so far, we are still old. We are still old in our articulation of what is African spirituality. When I say old, I'm not really saying old, because the eldest spirituality of Africa is not what is defined as the, I can call it floaty. Sorry for that, but that's what I call it. It's a floaty kind of explanation. But African spirituality, we are going to learn that it is very nuanced, it is very detailed, it is logical, it is mathematical, and that's why we build the pyramids to begin with, right? It was not this floaty spirituality that today we profess as African spirituality. Okay, So that's what creates then a conflict in the mind of a person, whereby now the source of knowledge or the source of articulation of the world. I was at school the other time in my, maybe I should call it out, Tulani Secondary School. So I used to go to school, give motivation to kids. So this time around, I went into a retreat for some years as I was building this new vocabulary. I went there into school saying to them, okay, I want to teach kids about Sintu, and I want to teach them about the chord equation, all right? So that they can unify God and science for supremacy in STEM. And then the principal said to me, well, this is a public school. We don't allow people to talk about spirituality. We don't allow people to talk about culture. We don't allow people to talk about God. I thought to myself, wow. She said, this is from the direct. This is a direct instruction from the Department of Basic Education. So even today, I just can't process it in my mind that being in this situation as Africa, South Africa, we are going to have, from very sophisticated people, such an instruction that goes into schools to say, don't talk about spirituality, don't talk about God. And I'm asking myself, do these people understand where knowledge comes from? Do they understand even the very science they are speaking about come from? Do they understand the environment that influenced the very science? Do they understand Albert Einstein himself? Do they understand Isaac Newton? Do they understand these very people? Do they understand how spirituality, even culture, played a role in the very knowledge that today we have? And also, do they understand the kind of conflict young people they go through, having to contemplate the world through spirituality, and then have to complicate the world or comprehend the world through physicality? It's you don't know the kind of torture people go through, be it young, be it old, it doesn't matter. We are being tortured, and the system is telling us you are not allowed to talk about it. So I then realized that, look at our government. They have signed on the dotted line for us to be inferior. Because if you state it like that, I mean, you are signing for us to be inferior. You don't understand how America, I mean, you're trying to be like Europe, you're trying, and then you don't even understand the conditions in Europe, in America, the one that you're trying to be like. China took control even of spirituality. They detected. So in South Africa, we're in a worse state where we have people who don't understand how knowledge works and how education works, you see. So a house that is divided cannot stand. And for you who is a member of MOYA with SIZWE, you are very lucky in that you are going to be able to understand that there is an integration. You must be integrated. You can leave them, it's fine. But you must understand that there must be an integration of spirit, of mind, and of soul. In Apes, or at Apes, we call this philosophy Ugomo. That is to say, Ugwaka Umuntu Wonke. Ugomo posits that a human being is a spirit, a soul, and a body. And if you have any plan to build a human being in exclusion to either of these aspects, let me tell you what, that's false. Now, I understand that we have delegations, you know. There are people who deal with spirituality, there are others who deal with physical things, there are others who deal with the soul, the mind, the psychologists. I get that. I'm not saying that everybody should do everything. I am saying that there should be a flow in your epistemology of spirituality. It must flow to physicality. It must flow even into psychology. There mustn't be a jump. As we stand, we must jump. And I said to you, it's not only here, it's everywhere. But here is worse. And if you're listening to me very carefully, then you'll understand that then we have an opportunity to do what? Not to catch up to the world, but to leapfrog the world. If we are able to solve these things that are also a problem to them. And it will not happen unless we also are able to say, okay, This is what we used to do. Now we are no longer going to do it. That means there must be a heart of repentance, even in us. But it's not going to be the same. That's why we are lucky. We have a little repentance to do, while the world have a much repentance to do. So the failure of the curriculum is not then to integrate the mind, which is the soul, the body, and the spirit. The education is not integrated. It's a big flop. Thus then the current education system, I call it a classification kind of education system, is where you classify. It's like, are you smart? Ah, you're smart. Okay, that's your class. When you are dumb, that's your class. We classify. We're not transformative because we don't understand how the mind works. We don't understand. We think people are born that way. You're not born that way. You are nurtured by your environment. You are nurtured by the system that you are in, the kind of knowledge that you are in, the kind of knowledge that you have, the kind of knowledge that your parents have. They are the ones that determine the kind of processes that happen in your mind. You see? So if the schooling system then understands that, the schooling system will understand that, okay, if we find a child cannot be able to read and write, understand to articulate mathematics and science, okay, there is a structural problem within the mind of a child, deep within the soul of the child, the spirit of the child, then we can be able to help the child develop to that place whereby they are able to also articulate like the next child. But we are a classification kind of education system. So that's very bad. But then thank God there is such institutions such as these ones. So I like to say that it is not an issue of motivation, because I know right now there will be it's too much motivation. It's not an issue of motivation, but it's an issue of structure. There must be a structure. And if we can do that, then we'll be able to get ourselves into a place whereby we win. We don't only just catch up. This 2026, we should stop thinking about catching up to Europe, catching up. No. We should dream to leapfrog the world because we can. Not because of we affirm it and we confess it and we shout it, but because of we have a structure that can allow us to leapfrog the world. And the kind of teachings that you are hearing me speak right now, they are the kind of teachings that will allow us, enable us to leapfrog the world, to be, I say, my ancestors, I call them the ninjas of thought, and you are going to see it now, because you're going to go into some of the concepts. I call them the ninjas of thought. King Ta will say, I call it national anthem. Indeed, we have forgotten who is our parents. That's why we settle for less. I remember Michelangelo he said that the biggest problem with many people is not that they aim too high and they miss. He says the problem is that they aim too low and they hit. And that has been our problem as Africans, as South Africans, is that we have aimed too low and we hit. You get the little things that we get and then you think, oh, this is success, like 88% pass rate. You aim too low for the kind of people that we are, and then you celebrate it as the big thing, and it's not, because of who we are, There was a study that the Minister of Education announced. It's, I think, Funda Siphumelele study, which took six years. This is a survey that came to conclude that the indigenous languages, they are not hindrances into us learning STEM language, science, mathematics, engineering, spirituality, theology, call it philosophy. Our languages is not a problem. It had to take a 6-year study. There have been intellectuals who have been saying this for years. We've been saying this for years. I have a book that starts with Richard Matanzem, who did a marvelous work to explain to us that other nations which have been like Africa, you talk about Asian nations, which have been running with Africa in terms of economic development. Today they are called the Asian tigers. Now he posits that they do so precisely because of they take their languages as serious. Now let me quote him. He says, the Asian countries are marching ahead of Africa because they use their own first languages for development. You see? So the Minister of Education, but I know they're just saying this thing right now, right? But they're going to mize it, especially with this 0.7%. They're just going to mize it because, I mean, they could be told, but there is this thing that we need to protect the colonist narrative, you know, we need to. That's the thing that happened in 702 FM. When I was calling to say that we need to be able to unify our languages for supremacy in STEM. And now, Brother Masango, if you know him, is very intellectual. I like him, very intellectual. He's very articulate. But, you know, how he responded to my suggestion, it told me that it's like, yeah, Kari, you know, because how he responded was not rational. You know, I was there. I mean, you can go to it and listen to it, ask for it if you want to. But he said to me, well, this idea of yours is powerless and it's weak. You know, I mean, I'm talking about the unification of African languages. So how could it be a weak and a powerless idea? Talk about breaking assimilation. What assimilation? The assimilation that allows us to be inferior. The assimilation that allows us to be running after, trying to catch up. That's the kind of assimilation that I'm accused of attempting to break with Isintu. I'll tell you why. Isintu claim is not like any other claim you have heard. This claim is unique and is damning. Because I am not saying that we should improve our languages, we should develop our languages for supremacy in STEM and science. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying something that is more damning. I'm saying that we should revert. We should go back to the ancestral language. So what I'm saying is, when the colonists came here, they already found us with the tools to be able to articulate the scientific world. And I'm also saying that, actually, when the elders, when they said to us, into yom tungeyam, it was not just a, just a saying. You know, somebody said, I was told this saying by a closer person a long time ago. And the way he was telling me that you see, I'm a closer, we are so mischievous, you know, into home to, you know, we are going to Skabanox men. We are going to take something that belongs to an African person to us into home to Gayam. And then, you know, we are going to find a way to even take that which is of a white person. But no, that's not what it means. Into home to Gayam. This was the elders. I say it's one of the principles that we are giving. There are three of them that show the way. There are three. So this one is saying that into yom tungeyam. That means what belongs to an African person is yours. That means eyo muntu uyayingena. You see? Eyo muntu eyomtswana nawe yakho. Eyomsuthu eyakho. Eyomxhosa, it doesn't matter. Into yomntu ngeyakho. You can be able to have an insight into anything that is African. And that's what the unification of Bantu languages means. This is what it means when I'm talking about the unification of Sintu languages. And that's what it is, something that makes the people to fear. Clever blacks. Sorry. Somebody rebuked me not to call them clever blacks because that's a corruption of language. It's a corruption of language. So it's not clever blacks. Rather, let me say pseudo-Africanists, okay? Because they are Africanists. They are fighting for Africa. You see, they'll say we're fighting for Africa to have opportunities, to have jobs and all of that, you know, to have the same privilege as white people. But they don't believe in Africa, okay? They don't believe that African intelligence, African wisdom, the wisdom of our ancestors, is a solution for this problem that we have in STEM, for instance. They are going to go and do their own things. I told you that there was a study, SIZWE said indigenous languages will make us powerful when it comes to STEM. Still, I'm telling you, they're going to mize it. Because they must protect what? The narrative. The narrative says you are primitive. The colonists, they came here, they found you primitive. and then they improved you. So now we can talk about developing your languages, because before you didn't have an idea that you got to be able to explain what is the light. You were just, I don't know, a chaser of goats and cows. I don't know, So we must maintain that narrative. And that's why Sintu, you may think, but you're talking about a mathematical language, our language, but why are you not giving a space even to such a big platform? I tell you why. Because a narrative must be preserved. And that narrative says, when you are primitive and you are developing by the grace of the Western people. Sintu is powerful, and I did say this when I was here in the first episode. I said, there is an argument that we can make, that we should make, that we make, that we need to speak our languages. Of course, this is our country, okay, so we need to speak our languages to one another. I did say that. And I just say to you, pack that argument. I'm not making that argument. It's a good argument. It's a powerful argument. I'm not making that argument with Sintu. The argument that I'm making with Sintu is that Sintu is an X factor. I'm saying to you, take English here, take Afrikaans here, take Mandarin here, put French here, all of your favorite languages, put Portuguese here. And I'm saying that as a scientific language, as an engineering language, as a mathematical language, Sintu is going to come out. All these languages. So I'm talking about the X factor of language. Now I want you to think about it, and you will understand what I'm saying when I'm saying that my desire, my dream is that we leapfrog, and we can, and we should. With your language, the language that is familiar to you, you can be able to do better. How much more when now we are talking about a language which is an X factor. So that is too much. A language which its structure is very scientific, is very mathematical. You listen to European scholars, American scholars, when they're talking about English, and I'm talking about scientists, they will tell you one thing, that English is not a scientific language, and for them it's all languages. Well, because if English is not, then all languages are not. As they say with the TOE, which I just mentioned, that nobody will get the TOE because they can get it, and I did get it. And I'm a high school dropout, and I'm an African, so I'm an anathema to the world, and I understand that, but I can apologize for it. And that's the power of Sintu. These things I learned it to Sintu. Because Sintu is a fundamental language, is a self-defining language. Okay, English is a labeling language. That's why English is difficult, because it's a language which it labels things. It's like, this is wind. Okay, this is not. This is. Sintu does not allow you to do that. You must define it. You see, but to us, of course, we are using our language, Sintu, like our mother tongues. Our mother tongues are like diluted. They are fallen languages because they are from the fallen ancestors. So I make that distinction, okay? Kona Batala, Kona, my ancestors. Abatala is those who have expressed the way they have expressed the Sintu. Not everyone is Abatala, but it's siyateketisa thina kuSintu, okay? So it's okay. Like ngibiza umngami ngenkosi, umngami kodwa ke uma ngizombiza ngenkosikazi, right? Ngiyateketisa. Ngizobiza ingane, ngibize ngumntwana. That's prince. That's the way for a royalty. But that's what we are. That's what we do, siyateketisa. So we say umdala, siyateketisa, right? Like I will say inkosikazi, siyateketisa. Like Rastafarians will say my queen. Okay? We know there is a queen. So, it's just ukuteketisa. But our language, Sintu, is very nuanced. And we can be able to I want to emphasize this because somebody, lots of things is happening. I mean, I had an interactions with many people who have heard me from here, MOYA, and we had some classes with them. And I found some other people, they were resistant towards Sintu. Some they were very interested to understand more about the number theory and the SWT theory. But when it comes to Sintu, they were resistant because for them, especially if they're not Zulu, if they're not Xhosa, they feel like, okay, it's like we are departing from this, my language. It's like I'm doing, why not I do Chivenda? I'm not busy with isiZulu, I said, no, this is not isiZulu. This is not isiXhosa, this is Sintu. And that's a difficulty that we have. I was listening to a conversation between Penuel and Abba Amayalek. And then the argument was that Sintu, in fact, our languages are different. We are different people. So. And one of the examples that they had was Nyalo. So I wanted to just talk about this word, Nyalo. Nyalo. The reason is Nya. Nya is a concept that our ancestors loved. They love Nya. Why I say that they love Nya is because you'll find Nya, it's one of the concepts that you will find penetrating in almost all our languages. The Pedi, Chivenda, Xhosa, Sotho, Zulu, Sotho, you will find words with Nya. And they are so interrelated in such a way that you will say, nah, man, this thing does not speak to each other. Like when Amaswati says, Natanyalo. Okay? So Nata, Mamia promised me, guys. She said this is home. MOYA SIZWE. So let me park Nata because it will take time. Let's deal with the other one, Nyalo. So Nyalo means in Swati now. Okay. So then you think, okay, but when we say now, as Xhosa will say ngoku. Okay. So timanje. And these are the kinds of examples. That's why I'm drawing them, which they have outlined to say, you see, our languages is not the same, it's not the same. I'm saying, yes, of course, when you take our languages from the mother tongues, yeah, of course. But our language is unified by an underlying structure, and that underlying structure has been hidden until it was made known unto me. Now, the scholars knew about it. You know, there are lots of scholars which have talked about it, like our great Nyang, you know, Uzul Matabo Zulu. But nobody has been able to articulate the 3 laws of Sintu. I'm the first person in the world to articulate the 3 laws of Sintu. The laws which brings together and really unify these vast African languages that we have, especially when we are talking about our languages here at home in the southern tip of Africa. So then you will ask then, how do then this word, how will you explain that Nyalo will be understood by Umzulu? That means what I'm trying to say is, how will then this word be the same word that Umzulu will articulate, Msotho will articulate, Xhosa will articulate under the principle of Sintu? Then let me show you. So you have this word Nya plus Lo. You have the 2 words now in Sintu. I want you now to see the mindset of our ancestors now. Sintu is not English, okay? The problem is that we've been trying to make Sintu English. It's not English. Even when we talk about developing it, we think, oh, okay, what is a Sintu word for this English word? He says, like, it's not like that. You know, like, just an example. I say Ipupo, I'm talking about an adventure in Sintu. Not a dream. It's a dream plus an adventure. But you don't understand it because of you want to borrow from English and then translate to Sintu. So you are speaking, as I say, what we're doing is we are speaking English through Sintu, through your SIZWE, through your Xhosa, but the framings in your mind, they are English framings. You see, they're not Sintu framings. So, but hey, you are very lucky. You are listening to MOYA SIZWE. So this word Nya means an interval. So here we are talking about an interval, an interval between 2 points, which are and which are not. So just think of an interval of the word Nya, okay? So an interval, of course, it does give you the 2 points, which are and which is not, because it's time, so it begins and it ends. So it's Nya. And that's why I think the ancestors loved Nya. It's not because of, I don't know, they love the sound. No, they loved the concept of Nya. And you can do so much about it, with it, through it, okay? Like we have Nyalo. So Nyalo, what you are saying is, now you have the law. The law is coming from the spectrum of Laleli Lolu, okay? So we talked about the La the other time, if you remember. I said La is here, and it is used to centralize a concept. And it's not only centralizes a concept, but it initializes a concept, okay? It says a concept initiated now. So we're going to talk about that when we have time. And then law, like law, is that says this particular. I love it, right? This is where we talk about uklwita. Asesihlwitha ulwimi lwethu ngaphandle kwenkokhelo. So we are expropriating our language without compensation. And we've been doing it, even though I was not announcing it, but we've been doing it here, where we show you the concepts of English and say, look at where it is derived. Okay, like this concept of law. And now you see biology, Scientology, everything that has logy, where do you think come from? It comes from the root concept of law. So when we talk about, when we put like law in any root weight, we are saying that consider that particular concept. So here we are saying that consider this particular concept of an interval. Consider it, this particular concept of an interval. So now think about it, okay? You say, okay, there's an interval law, this particular interval. So that's it. Think about it, extrapolate it. That means now, you see? So this is how they came to say then nyalo means now, because I'm talking about this interval right now, okay? And now it's the same as manje. Now you understand manje, ma, absolute. And then we have nje, which is the inverse of nja, ja, jajeji, jochu, that's from the spectrum. And it means accurate action that meets, okay? So when you have an action that approaches and it meets, right? That will be called a nja. Like inja, okay? Inja is because of, do you see inja when it runs, right? It always approaches you, because it approaches, you say, jaha, it's like approach, you know, get that person. So when we say nje, we are meaning that approaching like now, you know, and also ngoku and ngoku. Now it's also the same two concepts which we have. I'm dealing with them on the Facebook is sent. You can check them. So I was dealing with that spectrum. Very beautiful spectrum, because you will discover that that's where we get the angle. That's where angle comes from. Sintu. I know you like it's too much, but I tell you the truth. That's where you get your word angle. You get it from ngangengingongo. You know, we're going to talk about that, but not today. Now, the ngo is the one that says through with the other, okay? So like when I say ngobani, you know, I'm saying I'm doing this, it's a true, but through somebody or something else. So it's a very intriguing concept. I like it because go is a state, you see? So they are talking about through this state. It's a ngoku. What I'm saying is, I want you to do this through this state, like the state that we are in now. Don't change the state. Don't wait until the state changes. Whatever you are doing, do it through the state that we are in right now. Do you see? And then this word nyam, it takes me to one of the words that shows how sophisticated. I mean, if you are doubting me right now, maybe this one will get you. We have Intshonalanga, we have Impumalanga, okay? We have Inyakato, we have Iningizimu. I want to talk about that. And one day I'll talk about why I'm using these references. Nyakato. Now, I said that Sintu is self-explanatory, okay? It's defining. Masiti is Sintu astoligwa. We don't mean that you say things which are unexplainable and don't explain it. We are saying that isinto astoliga badala lava basitshela. Awustoligi ngoba when you want to know, you must go to Sintu and say, Sintu, what are you saying? All right? Study Sintu. And people are not studying Sintu. Intellectuals, African intellectuals, I mean, I can't blame them. Nobody has really understood these three laws, so it has been a mystery, okay? But isinto astoliga, what they mean, the ancestors, is go to Sintu. Sintu says, okutshela what it means, because it's a self-defining language, like when we say it's the West, okay? It's in Intshonalanga, that's explaining itself, All right, we say the east, Mpumalanga, that explains itself. And then we say iningizimu. Have you ever thought then, what does it mean? And then we say inyakato. Have you ever thought, what does it mean? Okay? So you have then nya. We've been talking about nya, that is in the interval. Ka, to. So we talked about the ka nomamia last time. All right? And then she even asked that, hey, I thought that ka means spirit. And of course, you know, in the African debates, you know, intellectual spaces, you'll find that ka it refers to spirit. And the other time, if you were listening to Omkulu, I think is Richard or Richmond, you forgive me his name, but it's Dalton, okay? He talked about Canaan and said that the history and the etymology of the word Canaan is from Canaan, okay? And then did mention that Canaan, actually, when he made his, I was so impressed, because he's American, you know, that when he made his research, he found that Canaan, actually in Africa, will mean that a slave, Kana, you know. And also, you will go, then you will also find that Kana also means a child. So you said, okay, it means a spirit, it means a child, it means a slave. How so? Okay, I did talk about it, explain that it's a conceptual language, the second law of Sintu, how concepts are able to transform when they go through various frames of references. Now I want you to watch this one with Ka. Ka is of, you know, of something, it belongs to something, you know. And it's a particular kind of because we're going to talk about other offs of Sintu, and you're going to find that the nouns are different. So when you say of na, okay, kana, of na, what is na? Na is particular, okay. So you are talking about a particular is from the na, ni, no, no. Okay, it's a spectrum of joining. It's a spectrum that connects things. Na, ni, no, no. Beautiful spectrum too. So when you say na, ka, na, you are saying of the particular. Okay? You're saying of the particular. Now I want you to think about it. When you're walking in the street and you see an adult walking in the street, you don't care. Okay? But when you're just walking in the street and then you see a child, 3 years, is walking there in the street and there is no adult, what do you say? All right? You look around and you're like, hey, where are your parents? Okay? Why? Because you understand that a child doesn't belong to themselves. The child belongs to somebody. So a child then is seen to iskan, right? Belongs to somebody, is of a particular, is of that particular person. And that's why a slave will be kana, is of that particular person. And that's why then kana then will be also be used, ana, be used to mean small things. That's where it developed. You see, because it's been used to mean that which is small, which it belongs to somebody else from a child. So this is how then language transforms as it goes through time, through various communities. So the problem, I did mention this the other time, that the problem then of explaining words by going just purely in etymology. It's good to go to etymology. This is what the linguists do. But we don't end there in Sintu, because there is especially with our situations in Africa, whereby we have very vast communities who have appropriated Sintu as their own, because it's their own, okay? There's no ambiguity about there. So we have to go to etymology, then go to the fundamental structure of Sintu, so that we can be able to derive the accurate meaning of the word. Like now, I'm able to tell you. Now, think about this now. To now another person, because now spirituality is a sovereignty. Okay, spirituality is sovereignty. If you understand spirituality, that's why you understand Ubungoma. I'm not Isangoma Mina Ngi Asosi. Okay. But then I love Ubungoma so much. Because of the principle, there are other things which I don't like, just like there are other things which I don't like in other things. Okay. We're going to talk about that maybe some other time. But here's the thing. Their humbleness. Okay. Very, very humble. You know, Masiti Togos. You know, they don't even go down on their knees. It's a mindset of humbleness. Same mindset the Muslims have when they say that Islam means humbleness. You see, it means offering yourself to the higher power. That's what it means. So then you'll understand how will then coming off will then imply spirituality at the end of the day. You see, because spirituality, you are always giving yourself. When we say spirituality, we are saying surrender. You say, give off yourself. That's what we mean. Spirituality. In essence, you are giving off yourself. I mean, you can talk to any spiritual person. They will tell you about how they are giving off themselves. You know, how they are denying themselves. We don't eat this, we don't drink that. You know, we pray at this time, we wake up at this time. We don't live like ordinary people. Why? Because we are not of ourselves. We are of others. See, that's why now we have ka. So nyaka to. Okay, to, very important and very intriguing. To is a pressure in Sintu. So it's from the spectrum of Tatetito 2. It's a spectrum of touch. And as this concept, remember that the spectrum, the meaning of the spectrum is that as the words go, as the meaning goes with the vowel spectrum, they change their initial definition, which we call kasimo, they are. Okay? So when you go to to, the spectrum of touch, to is a touch of pressure. So it's not just a touch, it's a touch, it's a particular touch of pressure. So you have nyagato, like you get it from October, you know, when you're like to. Ba is always numeric. It could be one, it could be many. So, but it means numeric. So mautoba, that's what you do. You apply pressure, you know. When we talk about nto, you see, you talk about nto, remember that we said that when you always bring n, you put n or m in Sintu weights, you take that concept and you make it into a property. So you're saying it's no longer a concept, you're saying it's a property. So when you're saying nto, you're talking about that property that brings pressure. That's nto. That's what says to you that anything that you have in your hand applies pressure on you, kinto. You see. Now you can talk about any pressure that you can talk about. Togoza, any pressure, you know. It's to. And every word that has to in it, you may like those that I've mentioned, you know, the intellectual people, but because of they don't understand how Sintu actually link. You may find how we're using to, it doesn't, you know, it doesn't add up. No, it does add up. You know, like tobalano, you know, it's a pressure that you're applying. So think about this now. They say the north is nyakato. Okay, so it's the interval of pressure. Right? And I think, oh my goodness, they understood that the north is an interval that is exerted by pressure. And that's what the north is. When you have a compass, you have a magnet, and then you point it, that magnet will always point where? To the north. So that's why they understand that the north, that's where pressure is. You see, that's why they say that the north then is inyakato. That's the interval of pressure. That's where we get that interval of the pressure from inyakato. You see it? So that's why I say that your ancestors, they are the ninjas of thought. They are very intellectual. And it's not me just making up things. I hope now you see that. And then they say Ningizim. How would they say Ningizim when they mean the south? All right. You think, oh, it's Ningizim. So you have the word Ni, you have the word Ngi. I don't want to get into it. Maybe if I have time, I'll get into it. But it means, I'll explain why it means that, but it means where the multitudes are. So our ancestors, that they thought the south is where the multitudes are. I don't know why. You'll tell me why. But that's what they said. The south to them is where the multitudes are. Kuseningizim. Baningile. Move. All right. Now, there's a word that I'm intrigued. I want to say it. Since it's 2026. I saw it online. They were talking about it. Okay. And I'm saying it because I was listening to this podcast. The man will sometimes sample speakers from MOYA SIZWE. This is Ricky. So he was explaining these words together with other Christian. You know, there is this song called Umvilingangi, you know. So there's been a lot of backlash towards this song, Mvilinqangi. And then others saying, from the African spiritualist cycle, saying that, oh, you should not say Mvilinqangi. Mvilinqangi is not God. Mvilinqangi is the first ancestor, you know. Others are saying, no, Mvilinqangi actually, it's not a word that refers to uNkulunkulu, you know, because of uNkulunkulu akavelanga, and here is thola uVelinqangi. It says uvela kuqala. So somebody saying that uvela kuqala. So let's get the education now that we don't get to Mlungu's school. Because there could be in townships, but it's still the Mlungu's school. All right, so you don't know what is Mvelinqangi. So let's break it down, right? So we have M there, and remember M is always making an object of a concept, right? And N. You have the concept that is very intriguing, ve. Okay, so ve is a very intriguing concept because it means it's from the spectrum of va. So I can only explain it with using the spectrum from va, ve, vivo, vo. We have va. Va is kasimo, that means frequency. Okay, so in something that is frequenting at a place, that is va. And vama will be frequenting. Ukvama. Okay, vamiso. So va is a concept of a frequency. Now, I want you to think about the frequency. Because I told you that your ancestors were very much conceptual. They're not like us right now. We're not learning their education, right? We are putting it there. Okay, so here how they understood it. Va is a frequency at a place. Now think about it. If I do this, you see, it's a frequency. Now if I had that speed and I can do it like this, you cannot put your hands through. And if I can do it with that speed, you can't even be able to see through. Okay? So I'm closing with the frequency. If I have a frequency at the place, okay, like how science define matter. They say matter is frequency. But when you look at matter, you don't see the frequency, but they will tell you now it's of higher speed. That when now with your eyes, you can't see it. And it's so small, you put your hand there, so fast you put your hand there. It's like it has blocked you. That's what frequency does. So that's why you will see then va being a frequency, we use it to vala. You're like, oh, what? Yeah, because it's a frequency at the place. It closes. Now the inverse of it, you remember the principle, the inverse of it is ve, which means it is a frequency at a place, but this one, because it's an inverse, you can see through. Okay? So you have a frequency at the place, but then you can see through. So you have it as to say ukveza. So I want you to think about this. It's not the same as the concept of qa. Okay? Now that's the concept that says that which is before other things. That's a qa. Okay, it's before other things. Okay. Ve or ve is not like that. Uqa says to you there is no history to this thing. It's just appearing. Okay? Ve is saying to you there is a history we don't know about this thing, but it's appearing. So ve la is not the same as just to appear. For that one we have qa, ukuqhamuka, you see. But for veza, vela, imvelo, okay? We are talking about things which are appearing. We don't have a sense of their history, where they come from. We know that they have been there, but they have been manifested. And this word, you can get it also in Latin. You see, Shlitama concept, right? Vera means truth, meaning revealing, even in Latin. That's where you get it. Then we have li, which is the, I call it the geometric term, okay? Because of li tells you the correlation of things. Like lili, it would be a shape, okay? Like isilisa, you know, it tells you masitubulili. We're talking about a shape. What's your shape? You know, that's why we have lili repeating there. Because at the root, li means a shape. Masiti lihle, we talk about the shape of it. How is it? Is li hle is well arranged. That's why we use the hle. So, veli, we are talking about then that thing that appears. Now, there is no history of it, where it comes from. It might be eternal. We don't know. We're not talking about it. We are just saying this thing is a form that appears, you know. And then we say ngangi, right? Remember the N. Be very particular and be mindful of the N. Now, I told you that it's before things. Now, Sintu is very sensitive in concept. You see? When now you see now the nga, you will understand that now, that means now the concept which is the concept of before now has been made a property. Okay? Now this is a thing that brings things before other things can bring it. That's why it's a nga. Okay, so imveli nga. Ayu vela kuqala. No, there's that. La kuthiwe, here it's been stated mveli ngangi. Okay, so it's a mveli nga. Okay, so this is a being that itself is a nga, or is a ka. Okay, it's the one that produces the things first. That's the being. And you know that is a being because they've been particular. I love this term. It's one of the most intricate, beautiful terms about God in any language. Okay? Ngi. Ngi means, so we talked about the spectrum of nga. Ngange ngi ngongu. Spectrum of ngong. Ngi is a true, but through self. Ngi. Okay? So now when you have mveli ngangi, you are being told that the expression of being first is of the person. The person is that thing or the object, the being or the entity that has been referred to is that thing. The thing itself is mveli ngangi. You see? So when we're talking then about the concept then of mveli ngangi, we are not talking about our ancestors, which is very good. You can say that. It's like when we say unkulunkulu. So umshana wa amino came to me. It's like about 13 years. So he comes to me and says, Malum, why not unkulunkulu? Hey, now I'm like, okay. Umshana is now becoming an atheist. Unkulunkulu mshana utinon. Jai, Malum, umkulu. So he's saying, Uncle, why are you saying that God is unkulunkulu? I'm saying, no, it's because it's Nkulunkulu. He says, no, it's not Nkulunkulu, it's Umkhulu womkhulu. All right? I said, you know. So I was so blessed by this young man who was thinking in this time, this is primary school. He's like refusing to be co-opted into this thing of abobalumi, abatabadala, because like, no, umkhulu. Yeah, so when they say umkhulu, I know you think they mean a great ancestor. Pay attention. Kuthiwe umkhulu womkhulu. They didn't say ukhokho. Okay? What they mean is, this one is the one abakhulu betu, they called him omkhulu. So this one, even to our abomkhulu, this one umkhulu. Umkhulu womkhulu. Do you get it? Umkhulu womkhulu. He's the one, even our ancestors who are great, they also refer to him as umkhulu. Why? Because of, we don't call umkhulu or ngegama lakhe. We don't call umuntu omdala ngegama lakhe. And it leads me somewhere. Let me leave my notes because this one I've been willing to say and it will help us to, okay, beautiful. Because we are wrapping, by the way. It's how many minutes? 2 minutes? 5 minutes? Okay, that's beautiful. So let me stop here because this is how I was able to discover these 3 laws of Sintu. It was because of the concept of God. If it wasn't for it, I wouldn't have discovered these 3 laws of Sintu. And I discovered it because of the principle that we don't call the elder by their names. How so? So I thought to myself, well, there is an argument that has been posited that the reason why we don't say Ra, you know, is because of we hadn't discovered Ra Re Ro Ro. So, you know, you said we were primitive, but that was not making sense because we have our ancestors around us who knew Ra. Ra, those are my ancestors too, you know, say Ra, Ramasidi, and so forth. So we knew Ra, okay? So I thought to myself, then there must be a different explanation than this one, but this cannot be an explanation since the others who are around us, who have been and who do profess Ra. So I said then the other reason, it might be since we know, and this is not up to debate, we know that the ancient god, which is the sun, which was worshipped by African people, even in Kemet, was called Ra. This is not in debate. So I said then what if then the possibility is that the reason why we're forbidden to say Ra, to utter R, is precisely because of, in that ancient world, our ancestors were there. Somehow they were there. And thus, therefore, they carried the principle of the ancient world to say, you don't call the name of our God Ra. I said, okay, given the explanation, which one makes sense? I thought, this one makes more sense than the other ones that we know that we hadn't discovered what is Ra, or the utterance of Ra, which it makes no sense, since there are others around us who are able to profess very well Ra. But for us, it's forbidden. You rather say Ha instead of Ra, or you rather say La instead of Ra. Precisely because of this is the name of the ancient God. So maybe I might carry it from here in the next session, and then explain then how did this thing in particular lead me to the discovery of the 3 laws of Sintu, which today we are about. Anyway, thank you for giving me time. And
thank you, Prince SIZWE. Umoya ulight, umoya upright. We'll see you again next time.
Who are you when all you were has been diluted by lies and white lines cancelling out all that which has been written of your history? Why do you look at yourself as a mystery? Doesn't the sun shine because you open your eyes? Doesn't the moon stay situated within the same stars your DNA sparkles off? Your spirit knows that surely corner into it off. Buza umoya so you may return to being well off. Because spiritually you are rich, yet your ancestors cry because you are out of reach. But yours is to command all elements, while God takes inspiration from the very mirror she looked at to become. Remember who you are, and never finish just when they think that with you they are done.